Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. Thank you so much for your patience. Paul Bartlett, thank you for the super chat. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. Hit subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get started. Paul, thank you again. Trump, for the third time, asks judge in hush money case to recuse. The judge, that's the ABC News, Bloomberg, the judge has stated he'll recuse. He'll decide to recuse on recusal next week. So he could have simply said, nah, I'm not going to recuse myself because of obvious conflicts of interest. Reuters, Trump seeks recusal of hush money payments over obvious conflicts of interest. The judge literally gave to a Stop Republicans political action committee. Anyway, hit subscribe. We'll get started. We'll talk about how the recusal will overturn the unconstitutional guilty verdict in New York. The New York court has no right or constitutional authority to decide on a federal case. The federal government dropped the hush money case. End of story. So, end of story. There's no right or ability to convict a citizen on a federal crime when the federal government, the FEC and the DOJ in this case, dropped the case. States cannot convict you of a federal crime when the federal government hasn't indicted you. The federal government dropped the hush money case because there was no case. Former FEC chairmen have stated there's no case against Trump. He could have paid Stormy with dollar bills. It wouldn't have been a crime. Anyway, hit subscribe. We'll get to that in a second. Let's listen to future President Trump.
President, regarding the Fed, if you win in November, do you want more of a say over the Fed on issues like the interest rate? And do you think that you can manage over the Federal Reserve? And do you think that you can manage a soft landing in the economy with the current leadership in place?
Right. Well, look, the Federal Reserve is a very interesting thing, and it's sort of gotten it wrong a lot. And he's tending to be a little bit late on things. He gets a little bit too early and a little bit too late. And, you know, that's very largely it's a gut feeling. I believe it's really a gut feeling. And I used to have it out with him. I had it out with him a couple of times very strongly. I fought him very hard. And, you know, we get along fine. We get along fine. But I feel the president should have at least say in there. Yeah, I feel that strongly. I think that in my case, I made a lot of money. I was very successful. And I think I have a better instinct than, in many cases, people that would be on the Federal Reserve or the chairman.
So we had record low poverty, record highs in household median income. We'll get to that in a second. With Trump, we had record low poverty, record highs in household median income, low inflation, low interest rates. This was before Democrats, media, experts, bureaucrats pushed to shut down economic activity. Okay? The fact that nobody is talking about, then there's a different word that is used pertaining to locking states and economies down. I just use the word shutdown, which is algorithmically friendly. It was the worst, most foolish, most counterproductive, most debilitating economic sin. We should never have shut down state economies, and Democrats did that gleefully, not because they wanted to help humanity. There was a political component there as well. That is why we're seeing a crash, and there's going to be a far greater crash, economic, financial, and Wall Street, probably late September, October.
Bates, I think that appreciate your being here. Just a statement before I talk about debates. I think that our country is right now in the most dangerous position it's ever been in from an economic standpoint, from a safety standpoint. Both gangs on the street and, frankly, gangs outside of our country in the form of other countries that are, frankly, very powerful. They're very powerful countries, and we don't know what we're doing. We have leadership that has no clue how to handle them or how to handle any other situation. We have a lot of bad things coming up. You could end up in a depression of the 1929 variety, which would be a devastating thing, took many years, took decades to recover from it. And we're very close to that, and we're very close to a world war. In my opinion, we're very close to a world war. We have people that don't know how to handle it. They're not respected. All over the world, they're laughed at. And we can't have that. Most dangerous period of time I've ever seen for our country. With that being said, we have somebody that hasn't received one vote for president, and she's running, and that's fine with me. But we were given Joe Biden, and now we're given somebody else. And I think, frankly, I'd rather be running against somebody else. But that was their choice. They decided to do that because Kamala's record is horrible. She's a radical left person at a level that nobody's seen. She picked a radical left man that is, he's got things done that he has positions that are just not, it's not even possible to believe that they exist. He's going for things that nobody's ever even heard of. Heavy into the transgender world, heavy into lots of different worlds having to do with safety. He doesn't want to have borders. He doesn't want to have walls. He doesn't want to have any form of safety for our country. He doesn't mind people coming in from prisons, and neither does she, I guess, because she's not, she couldn't care less. She's the border czar. By the way, she was the border czar 100%. And all of a sudden, for the last few weeks, she's not the border czar anymore, like nobody ever said it. And I just hope that the media becomes more diligent, more honest, frankly, because if they're not going to be honest, it's going to be much tougher to bring our country back. We have a very, very sick country right now. You saw the other day with the stock market crashing. That was just the beginning. That was just the beginning. It's going to get worse. It's going to get a lot worse, in my opinion. And fortunately, we've had some very good polls over the last fairly short period of time. Rasmussen came out today. We're substantially leading, and others came out today that we're leading, and in some cases substantially. I guess MSNBC came out, or CNBC came out also with a poll that was, has us leading, and leading fairly big in swing states. In some polls, I'm leading very big in swing states because they want safety. People want safety. They want security. They want respect all around the world for our country. They don't want this horrible culture that is developing, a culture of no common sense. It's really a culture of no common sense, and it's not what anyone wants. We want to have a safe country. We want to have a strong military. We want low interest rates, and we want to be able to have the American dream. We want to be able to have our youth be able to buy homes, housing, get good jobs. And we're really just at the opposite right now. It's so sad to see. But as a border czar, she's been the worst border czar in history, in the world history. I think the number is 20 million, but whether it's 15 or 20, it's numbers that nobody's ever heard before. 20 million people came over the border during the Biden-Harris administration. 20 million people, and it could be very much higher than that. Nobody really knows what the number is. Nobody knows. Nobody has a clue. And the gotaways, they call them the gotaways. The gotaways are at numbers. Somebody was quizzing me on it the other day. No, I don't think so, sir. I don't think so. They have no idea what those numbers are, but they're much higher than you would think. Just like far more people were killed in the Ukraine-Russia war than you ever buy bacon. They can't buy food. They can't buy groceries. They can't do anything. And they're living horribly in our country right now. With all of that being said, I think it's very important to have debates, and we've agreed with Fox on a date of September 4th. We've agreed with NBC, fairly full agreement, subject to them, on September 10th, and we've agreed with ABC on September 25th. So we have those three dates, and those networks, they're very anxiously awaiting that date and those dates. So we have September 4th, September 10th, and September 25th. We have spoken to the heads of the network, and it's all been confirmed, other than some fairly minor details. Audience, some location, which city would we put it into, but all things that will be settled very easily, I think it'll be very easy. The other side has to agree to the terms. They may or may not agree. I don't know if they're going to agree. She hasn't done an interview. She can't do an interview. She's barely competent, and she can't do an interview. But I look forward to the debates because I think we have to set the record straight. Why is it that millions of people were allowed to come into our country from prisons, from jails, from mental institutions, insane asylums, even insane asylums? That's reasons, or because of being politically correct, even though she never received a vote. Don't forget, she was the first one defeated, as I remember it, because I watched it very closely, but she was the first one. She never made it to Iowa, the first state. She never made it to Iowa. She was the first one that was defeated.
So Democrats don't have an actual primary. They talk about democracy, but their primary is essentially a communist system of just picking your or a Tammany Hall, old school Tammany Hall political machine system. It's a political party like the Communist Party in the old Soviet Union, where there's people that rise to the top for whatever reason. They're not chosen by anyone. They're not chosen by the people. So Kamala Harris did not win a primary. She did not actually compete at all in the primary. She didn't get enough support to even enter the Democratic primary. Okay, Biden did, and Biden had never even gotten past Iowa in any primary in his 40 years plus in office or in politics. And suddenly, he did very well against Trump. We all know how that goes. So Democrats said, "Oh my God, he's literally the most popular candidate of all time." Okay. Then he gets ousted after having won his primary. What they did to Biden is actually infinitely worse than what they did to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, they cheated and completely railroaded him, but he never got a chance to win. So it's funny, there were people who, numerous, like million plus sub channels, one in particular said, "Oh, you said that Bernie would win." We know from the DNC emails that the DNC chairwoman resigned. Why did she resign? That is a question that people who said to me, "Oh, you said Bernie would win." Why did the DNC chairwoman resign? It was not fair. We did not know it wasn't. Well, we kind of knew, but there wasn't categorical proof that it wasn't fair and neutral. So that's why he didn't win, because it wasn't fair and neutral. People don't win or lose based on meritocracy within the Democratic Party. They're picked, they're chosen. In fact, the DNC was sued, and in the lawsuit, in court, they said, "Well, you know what? We can pick and choose in smoke-filled back rooms. We don't even have to have a primary." So there's zero semblance of meritocracy. It's just a primary that they just make things up. And then the journalists, who are basically Democratic activists, take it seriously. "Oh, the primary." So they just ousted Biden after he actually won a primary, after having won a presidency, then his primary, then he's going into 24, then they oust him with somebody who actually didn't run in a primary. So these people talk about Trump being a threat to democracy. They don't even know what the definition of democracy is. They've redefined democracy as whatever is good for their political party.
She was the nastiest to him. She was nasty with calling him a racist and the school bus and all of the different things. She was very nasty to Biden. And shockingly,
the political calculus there was, "Oh, well, Biden did bad things, but I forgive him, so now you can vote for him."
Appointed her, asked her to serve as vice president. Well, I don't know if he's happy about that decision right now. This was taken away. The presidency was taken away from Joe Biden. And I'm no Biden fan, but I'll tell you what, from a constitutional standpoint, from any standpoint you look at, they took the presidency away. And people were saying he lost after the debate. He couldn't win. Well, I don't know that that's true necessarily. But whether he could win or he couldn't win, he had the right to run. And they took it away. They said they're going to use the 25th Amendment. They're going to hit you hard. Either we can do it the nice. I know exactly, because I know a lot of people on the other side, believe it or not. And they said, we'll do it the nice way or we'll do it the hard way. And he said, All right. So that, I mean, they've really taken, what they've done is pretty incredible. And now I'm running against somebody else, and we're leading. We're leading. So I'm not complaining. I'm saying it's for a country with a constitution that we cherish. We cherish this constitution. To have done it this way is pretty severe, pretty horrible. You would have thought they would have gone out to a vote. They would have had a primary system. They would have done something, but to just take it away from him like he was a child. And he's a very angry man right now, I can tell you that. He's not happy with Obama, and he's not happy with Nancy Pelosi, crazy Nancy. She is crazy, too. She's not happy with any of the people that told him.
So you have people around the country who are good, liberal, morally superior liberals. They say, oh, he insults people. I don't like him insulting people. But he doesn't have the New York Times working for him. He doesn't have the Washington Post working for him. The Washington Post and New York Times and MSNBC and CNN, The Atlantic, these people don't get a paycheck from the Democratic National Committee. They don't have to. What they do is pro bono, essentially. You will not find one journalist who has written an article in defense of Trump or said anything good about Trump in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Maybe one, maybe. But let's just say it's not hyperbole. It's not completely hyperbolic to say you will not find one. If you find one, it doesn't undermine my overall point. Almost every journalist for the New York Times, MSNBC, CNN, The Atlantic, Washington Post, New Yorker, New York Magazine, Rolling Stone, then you used to have Vice, you used to have BuzzFeed. Democrats don't have to insult their opponents. They can just simply rely on a never-ending stream of negative vitriol, investigative journalism that investigates only Republicans and only Trump. So they don't have to, I mean, they don't have to, insult their opponents. I mean, Trump doesn't have to either, but it's like a public relations tactic. He doesn't have a monstrosity, public relations monstrosity. So that's what he does. Instead of journalists, politely emailing conservative pundits or conservatives or politicians saying, well, I'm doing a story on you. It's actually a hit piece. You're writing a hit piece. Your editor told you to write a hit piece. Then when you try to sue because it's full of nonsense and you're accused of something, you have to prove malice. And then the courts, especially in New York, can never find any malice in the New York Times or the MSNBC or CNN or the Washington Post or any federal courts. You can never find malice. I mean, they're just doing their job, trying desperately to tear down every Republican and Trump, while at the same time ignoring every single major Democratic Party scandal in the manner they don't do journalism when it comes to Democratic Party scandal. They report on it, but there's no investigative journalism. There used to be a time when journalists would focus pretty much the same on, the Clinton Oval Office scandal issue as they would with Republicans. But now that time is long past.
That you've got to leave. He's very unhappy, very angry, and I think he also blames her. He's trying to put up a good face, but it's a very bad thing in terms of a country when you do that. I'm not a fan of his, as you probably have noticed. And he had a rough debate, but that doesn't mean that you just take it away like that. Or you go out to a vote, you do something. He had 14 million votes. She had no votes. She got no votes. And I think she's crashing. I think when people find out, and I think people are starting to find out what a bad job she did on the border. She's trying to say she had nothing to do with the border. She had everything. She was appointed to head the border. And then they said border czar. Oh, she loved that name. She loved that name. But she never went there.
By the way, Biden didn't just have a bad debate. Okay? He didn't just have a bad debate. Okay? There are pundits out there who have like 2-3 million sub channels who were saying right before the debate that it was Trump that had the cognitive issues. It wasn't Biden. In fact, they spoke to professionals, and the professionals said Biden is normal age-related issues. And then the Democratic Party literally ousted him. How wrong can you be? How delusional and disingenuous? You're either delusional or disingenuous if you're trying to convince people that there was nothing wrong with Biden. And of course, the White House was saying, "Oh, these videos are cheap fakes," and then they ousted him. I mean, there's like they say Trump lies. He actually tells the truth a lot more often than Democrats. Like Trump is hyperbolic about things that don't matter, like crowd size, and then Democrats, you see, he lied, or he's like hyperbolic. He'll say like, "Oh, everyone agreed with that." And they'll say, "Fact check," and nobody agreed with it. Or a lot of people disagreed. But see, they'll lie about laptops, about like major bribery and graft scandals with a laptop, inflation numbers. They'll lie about like national security issues, like major, like servers with top secret intelligence on them. They'll lie about major issues. Okay, like when one government agency literally tampered with evidence to make it seem that Trump mishandled classified data, which he didn't. He was a president with the power to declassify. But let's continue. Clinton and Biden did not have the power to declassify. Trump did. That's why if anyone should have been indicted, it should have been them, not Trump.
She went to a location once along the border, but that was a location that you would love to go and have dinner with your husband or whoever. That was a location that was not part of the problem. That was not really going to the border. So essentially, she never went to the border. And if you listen to Tom Homan, if you listen to the great border people, Brandon Judd from the Border Patrol, if you listen to Paul, I mean, so many different people. I speak to them all the time. And I did when I was president. We had the best border in the history of our country. Now we have the worst border in the history of the world. Millions of people coming in, and our country cannot sustain it.
Well, there's an issue also with a recession on the horizon, okay? And also a terrible economy. Let's continue.
Stephanie, let's start with rate cuts. So all we've heard in the last few days is we need an emergency rate cut right now, and then another deep, like 75 basis point rate cut at the meeting in September, because that's just going to fix it all. I say pig potatoes. What say you?
Yeah. Wah. I mean, talk about snowflakes, but a little perspective here, Dagan. You know, the market is up 150% from the lows during COVID. It's given back 7.5% of that. In dollar terms, we rose 34 trillion, and we've given back 4 trillion. And they're screaming and crying because they want a rate cut and they want the Fed to bail them out of this eviscerating sell-off that they had to endure for one day. So right. No sympathy here. Additionally,
so think about that. 1 day, 3 days or so, $4 trillion in losses. Granted, 34 trillion, then 4 trillion of that just in a couple of days. But it's been 4 years to get the 30 plus. In a couple of days, you got 4 trillion down. You could get 20 trillion down, God forbid. Well, it's very likely going to happen. And the interesting thing about that is that, like, that's the overall market. It doesn't mean your stocks are going to rebound in the same manner, or that you will, or that you made the equivalent amount in terms of percentages of your portfolio.
As you know, and we've talked about endlessly over the years, you know, this is lather, rinse, repeat, where the Fed basically overstays accommodation too long, inflates a bubble, then, you know, acts too slowly to address it. This time, you know, inflation got out of control. Then they raise rates too far, too fast, drive the economy.
So you can look like in 08, right before, in 2008, the market went down to 2006 levels, okay? 1929 and 2000. So the market can go down. The S&P could go down 50% or 40%. Okay. So it's like you could lose almost everything you gained in the past 4 years in the matter of 6 months.
Economy into recession, and then run in with the fire hoses the second the markets start to feel the pain. Meanwhile, middle America is the one that pays the price for all of this feckless monetary policy via a reduced dollar purchasing power after every serial, asset bubble goes bust, and they come in and print more money to numb the pain. So, yeah, no sympathy over here for emergency rate cuts.
Yeah, save our asses, save our assets. That's all they care about.
So, Stephanie, you mentioned middle America. Let's talk about consumer debt. That's certainly not helping the economy. American households now owe more than $18 trillion in debt, and more than $1 trillion of that debt is on credit cards, which leads us to the biggest problem related to that, which is that more than 1 in 10 credit card holders right now are at least 3 months behind in their payments. So again, as those interest rates go up, they're high. I think the average is 20% right now plus. This is putting a crimp on the American consumer. What impact do you think this has on the economy and the American family's ability to dig out of debt?
Well, the credit card thing is sort of a consequence of what's happened in the economy, not a cause. It's, obviously we had this period where they got all this COVID stimulus, and most of them used that money to pay down credit card debt. Then when that stimulus ended, all of a sudden inflation took off, and they had to borrow on their credit cards to keep up with the rising cost of living. And now they've run up their credit card balances, as you said, to all-time record highs at 23% interest rates. Non-mortgage debt service has doubled since the Fed raised interest rates 2 years ago. So households are really feeling the pinch. I would highlight in the University of Michigan survey, they have various components. And one really sticks out to me, and that is the share of households that expect inflation will outpace their income hit an all-time high. And this data goes all the way back to the 80s. So that means that people have more dire outlook for their income, real income, than they did even during the depths of the Great Recession in 2008.
So the stock market went up 34 trillion, just the stock market. But in 2008, $17 trillion. I'm looking at Investopedia on my phone. In household wealth evaporated. Home prices declined 40%. The S&P 500 declined 38.5%. 8.8 million jobs were lost. Unemployment spiked to 10% by October 2009. So, I mean, you can lose 17 trillion lost in household wealth is a lot more important than the 35 trillion gained in the market that can evaporate also. You lost 4 trillion in just a 3-day sell-off. Okay, 3 days you lost $4 trillion in the market. That's with economists and the world thinking that everything will be fine. People still generally, like Wall Street still thinks that everything will be fine. They already saw 4 trillion lost in 3 days. That's just in terms of the wealth on Wall Street. We're not even talking about the household wealth in America. The 2008 crash, 17 trillion in household wealth. That's like real wealth. That's not just like the 34 trillion in stock prices. It's not really something that most Americans benefited from. But unfortunately, you'll have trillions and trillions of losses. And we had on just Main Street, and we had record household median income at record highs with Trump.
So people are really feeling the squeeze, and to consider that survey was done when the unemployment rate was 4.1. I mean, heaven forbid we take the unemployment rate up to 6 or 7. What are households going to do in that environment? They're really feeling the burn now, and the employment shoe really hasn't dropped yet.
They're probably not going to.
Then you have rumblings of a recession, but see, a recession isn't really like, you don't need a recession as a precursor to a market crash. A market crash can cause a recession, and we're heading towards a terrible market crash, likely late September or October.
I got to say, my next guest is probably the most noticeable person kind of pushing back on the Assam rule because, well, it's Claudia Assam. She's the chief economist at New Century Advisors. All right, Claudia, we spoke just recently, and it seems everyone now, here's an interesting thing. Everyone's adding their own tidbits to.
So this is the individual who made the Assam rule. That's who she is, and she created the metric for predicting or evaluating recessions.
Your indicator. Now, I'm not sure if you ever put out an official pamphlet, but people were saying yes, but, no, but. In fact, give you an example. Someone could use the full-time jobs versus part-time jobs, right? That's indicating a potential recession. So what do you need to see to be convinced that recession, we're in it, or it's right around the corner?
A recession is a broad-based contraction economic activity. So I think we need to see more signs of it. I don't think we need to see more signs to have, say, policymakers act like the Federal Reserve. But in terms of like really saying this is a recession, we're not there. The labor market data, and frankly, if it continues to worsen, that is a very negative sign because a lot of the other measures we have will revise a lot. That very first chart you showed about what it looked like before with the Assam rule and other data, and now, well, you know, that's what the data look like right now for 2001. And like Anna Wong has been very clear about, we have to be careful that particularly in moments where the economy turns, right, it can be really hard to measure it.
And you know, I mean, for me also, we not only do we get you know, the rate of change sometimes speeds up on the way down. There's revisions, and we find out what we thought wasn't true. And I want to go back and I actually did go back and read transcripts of this emergency Fed meeting. It was January 3rd, 2001. Greenspan, he argued for an emergency rate cut. And he talked about a lot of things that it seems like this could be the conversation at the Fed right now. And he said, listen, he compared to this comforting feeling that most economists say that we're not there yet. He said it was of a person falling off a 30-story building and still experiencing a state of tranquility 10 floors above the street. So far, so good. He went on to say that he was asked, well, is this an emergency cut? Would it be a sort of insurance policy? And he said, yes. Is that the way maybe the Fed should be looking at this now?
Well, the Fed should be watching very carefully what's happening with the data. I think especially with the next employment report will be decisive for what they do in December. One, you know, a difference between now and back when Greenspan was making those very, he was right on there, is that the markets, they're doing some of that intermeeting work for the Fed. Right. When the jobs report came out, we've seen the futures federal funds rate, we've seen some of the interest rates moved up. That's what we need, is to take a little bit of pressure off, right? A sign of a recession, a sign of not even a recession, just weakening that is going past what is necessary to get inflation down. Well, steps should be taken. It doesn't just have to be the Fed cutting rates. It can also be the anticipation of that coming. The Fed does have to then deliver, but they don't have to do it in between. That is a big, break glass.
Right. So no emergency cut for you, but you were saying cut that even before the jobs report, you told me the Fed was behind. So are we now at a point where you want to see, or we need a 50 basis point cut in September?
Given all that we know now, I think a 50 basis point cut would be appropriate. I think that's what the Fed is going to do. Not unless they really feel like they have to, right?
So if they cut interest rates 50 basis points, then what happens to inflation? You tell me in the comments section. Okay? You're watching this show. You know as much about economics and finance as I do. What happens when inflation skyrockets? Okay, you raise interest rates. Well, then inflation goes down, but interest rates remain high. What happens when you lower interest rates? Then what happens to bond prices? Okay. So bond prices go up when you lower interest rates. So there's kind of like a balancing act here. Let's continue. I mean, Wall Street's then okay with inflation going up, which hurts the consumer and hurts profits.
They would like to go gradually, and I think that's I think the that could be very appropriate. My view is they should have been cutting for a while because the economy it's easing off and it is normalizing. The Fed needs to normalize. So they should be doing some catch up. I think, unfortunately, I think that probably is where they're going to be headed, because I think what we're seeing, even if the SOM rule is overstating it some, it is picking up on something. And many of these other indicators you showed are picking up on something that is very worrisome.
All right, I only have maybe 20 seconds, so I'll ask a personal question. Now that you're like famous everywhere, you're getting free drinks, people opening more doors for you. I mean, how is it to be like the ultimate economic celebrity in America right now? I mean, you must be getting a whole bunch of free stuff.
No, this has not been fun. And it's really tough to have. It was never supposed to turn on outside of a recession. I'm not trying to stoke any kind of panic, but no, there is no fame and fortune.
So there's nothing anyone can say to create any panic. Unfortunately, sadly, you know what? I hope I'm wrong, but panic will set in the market because the stock market was artificially inflated by terrible policies, by terrible decisions made by bureaucrats. And it's interesting. Communism in the old Soviet Union was in large part central planning. The economy was functioned through central planning. And you had economists deciding prices and deciding economic activity. Here we had bureaucrats deciding economic activity 4 years ago. Oh, I think you should have already shut down everything. And so bureaucrats, media, this hysterical, apoplectic, foolish mania that overtook our country because of a very serious issue. See, Democrats say, oh, you know what? How many people are suffering? Yes, that doesn't mean that you make things worse. Every time the Democratic Party or even Republicans 24 years ago, every time politicians make terrible, foolish mistakes, they say, well, we had to. There's, so many people were suffering. So you made things worse? You made things worse for people? You shut down economic activity and then you flooded a generation full of stimulus and debt. There's an entire future generations, not one, numerous future generations will be dealing with the stimulus and the debt of 4 years ago and the debt of today. Well, people were suffering and you made things worse. You couldn't have thought in a rational manner just because multilateral or multinational organizations said do this. You said, okay, how high? You said they say jump, we say how high. You should. That's why with Trump, the great thing about Trump is he does what's good for the country. He doesn't do what's good for what the world thinks is good. He does what's good for the country. He puts the country's interests first. Democrats put the interests of everyone else, and they say, oh, that's the country's interest. Anyway, hit subscribe. See you tomorrow, everybody. God bless you. Paul Bartlett, thank you. Truffles, thank you. Paul, thank you again. To my viewers around the world, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Thank you so much.